Good evening and welcome to NTD UK News. I'm Stuart Lees. Here are today's top stories. The Home Secretary announces harsher penalties for so-called eco-warriors. A group of climate activists have blocked major roads in recent weeks.
We are going to go further to close down the legal loopholes exploited by these offenders.
Facebook blames a faulty configuration change for causing the social media blackout on its platforms yesterday. Facebook, WhatsApp and Instagram are now back up and running. And a new report says clergy in France are believed to have sexually abused more than 200,000 children over the past 70 years. Home Secretary Priti Patel says she won't tolerate climate change activists blocking roads and causing disruption. It comes as the Prime Minister calls them irresponsible crusties. NTD's Jane Roils has this report.
Disruption on Britain's motorways in the headlines in recent weeks as a climate activist group changed tactics, running in front of cars and gluing themselves to major roads. The Home Secretary says she'll bring in new, tougher laws to deal with them.
The freedom to protest is a fundamental right our party will forever fight to uphold. But it must be within the law. Measures already going through Parliament will ensure that these criminals can be brought to justice for the disruption that they are causing. But we are going to go further to close down the legal loopholes exploited by these offenders.
At the Conservative Party conference, Patel announced harsher penalties for disrupting a motorway and plans to criminalise interference of key infrastructure such as roads, railways and the press. This comes as activists blocked motorists in London. Paramedics had to drag them off the roads. One woman was on the way to see her mother in hospital. The group apologised after the Prime Minister called them irresponsible crusties.
All states have a responsibility.
On immigration, Patel says the government is going after the people smugglers, profiting from the channel crossings.
Where there is a door, there must be a doorkeeper. What is happening in the channel with small boats is unsafe, unfair and unacceptable.
In a statement met with applause, she emphasises France is a safe country and there's no reason for asylum seekers to come to the UK directly from France. The Home Secretary also announced an inquiry into the event leading to a serving police officer murdering Sarah Everard. She said she'd do more to keep women and girls safe. Jane Roils, NTD News.
Health Secretary Sajid Javid said in Manchester today the next challenge he faces is the effect the pandemic has had on society and the economy. Javid said the Conservative Party is the party of freeing things up, not locking things down, and he praised the UK's vaccination programme. On the NHS, he admitted it's not the best at everything. Government ministers have reportedly ordered a full-scale inquiry into the leak that fueled the petrol panic buying. That's according to the Daily Mail. On 16th of September, government officials met heads of industry and trade groups and discussed a shortage of HGV drivers. Details from this private meeting were allegedly leaked to British TV channel ITV by an unknown source. ITV's report then led to panic buying that has emptied petrol stations across the UK. A senior government source said the leak led to serious disruption which damaged the British economy and endangered public health. They said we need to find who was responsible and ensure something like this never happens again. UK Transport Secretary Grant Shapps blamed the leak information for the public reaction on 26th of September on Sky News' Trevor Phillips on Sunday show. The Daily Mail reports the Cabinet Office will head the investigation. NTD contacted the Cabinet Office but received no comment in time for broadcast. Social media services Facebook, WhatsApp and Instagram are back up and running today after an outage that lasted almost 6 hours on Monday. Facebook blamed an internal technical issue but says there is no evidence that user data was compromised. NTD's Joy Duguid brings us this report.
Facebook, WhatsApp and Instagram were down from about 5 p.m. until around 11 p.m. on Monday. Facebook said in a statement that a faulty configuration change affected the company's internal systems, complicating attempts to resolve the problem. Chief Executive Mark Zuckerberg apologised for the disruption in a post on Tuesday. Facebook's internal communications platform also went down, leaving many employees unable to do their jobs. Social media users reported being unable to access the platform in the UK, Europe and the US. Media reports suggest the outage affected people worldwide. Similar reports were posted about Instagram and WhatsApp, both owned and operated by Facebook, the world's biggest social media company. Although app outages aren't rare, to have so many interconnected platforms go down at the same time is. The outage caused a drop in Facebook shares, down by almost 5% at the market's close on Monday. This came a day after a former Facebook product manager turned whistleblower went public on American TV on Sunday night. Frances Horgan amassed internal documents that revealed Facebook's awareness of harm caused by its platforms, providing the evidence to US lawmakers and the media. The whistleblower was scheduled to testify before Congress on Tuesday about the impact of Instagram on young users. Joy Dugid, NTD News.
A short story about a Chinese boy by English comedian turned children's book writer David Walliams is to be removed from future editions. It's a result of criticism by a British-born Chinese podcaster who said it stereotypes Chinese people. NTD's Eddie Aiken has the details.
A story about a Chinese boy is to be removed from one of David Walliams' books after facing criticism that it uses racial stereotypes. Walliams' publisher HarperCollins Children's Books has confirmed a new edition of The World's Worst Children to be released next year without the story Brian Wong, who was never, ever wrong. It comes after podcaster Georgie Ma complained that the story unfairly represents the Chinese community and could contribute to normalizing jokes on minorities from a young age. Ma told the Bookseller magazine that the way Brian is illustrated is full of harmful stereotypes. He wears glasses, has small eyes, and looks like a nerd. After meeting with Ma, HarperCollins says a new story will be written to replace the Brian Wong story in future editions. Walliams is an actor and comedian and also a successful children's author. He has published over 30 children's books and sold over 45 million books worldwide. Eddie Aitken, NTD News.
Poland says it will summon the British ambassador in Warsaw to explain why a Polish right-wing journalist was refused entry at Heathrow Airport. Poland's human rights ombudsman previously accused the journalist of anti-Semitism after he said on television last year that some Jews cooperated with Germans in the Holocaust. In 2014, he was accused of justifying rape in a tweet that said, "Whoever has never taken advantage of a drunk person, let him throw the first stone." Rafał Zimkiewicz was denied entry on Saturday after travelling to Britain with his wife and daughter, who is starting a course at Oxford University. MP Rupert Huck posted a letter on social media stating UK Border Force made the decision due to the journalist's conduct and views, which are at odds with British values and likely to cause offence. Poland's Deputy Foreign Minister wrote on Twitter, "This week, I will invite British Ambassador Anna Clunes to the Foreign Ministry to make sure that freedom of speech is included in the catalogue of British values." Zimkiewicz has denied allegations of prejudice and says his statements have been misrepresented. A festival at London's Kew Gardens combines horticulture with Japanese art, featuring 5,000 haiku poems suspended by red threads. NTD's Neil Woodrow goes to find out more.
High above the heads of garden visitors hangs a huge installation with a distinctively Japanese flavour called 1000 Springs. It's the star of the Japan Festival here at Royal Botanic Gardens, Kew. 5,000 haikus, or Japanese poems, submitted by members of the public are suspended by red thread.
Kew's got a really long, enduring relationship with Japan, not only the architecture and horticulture around our gardens, but through our connection to nature. We know through Japanese culture, nature is hugely important, and so this festival kind of joins the dots slightly between that and allows artists and horticulture to come together to really celebrate the best of what Japan has to offer.
The installation is the work of Japanese artist Shiharu Shiota. Haikus are short poems structured so that the first line contains 5 syllables, the second has 7 and the last 5. Shiota wanted to include them in the work because they traditionally address themes of nature and the seasons, perfect for this location. 1000 Springs took 6 days to hang.
I was very nervous to present my work at Kew Gardens. I was concerned how my work would look like in a space which is not for art, but surrounded by plants instead. In fact, the colour red in my work and the plants work well together, so I am pleased with it.
The art inside the Victorian glasshouse is protected from the changing seasons outside, but as summer turns to autumn, Shiota reflects on what she sees back home at this time of year.
Autumn is the most beautiful season in Japan. Spring, autumn, and autumn is a lot of red color in the leaf. It's turned green to red to yellow, and it's so beautiful. It's a mountain.
Tucked away in the temperate house's north octagon is the chalk garden. This serene and calming environment has been designed to show a contemporary Japanese garden. Bamboo and fern sit alongside grasses and acer shrubs, also known as maples.
The important thing about this garden is about contemplating yourself when you're looking at gardens. So you discover many aspects or elements or beauty of the garden through your standing point, and you can observe different elements, and that's when you start to reflect your thoughts within your head.
This is a cross-cultural space, so as well as plants that reflect Japanese horticulture, there is also a British influence. The stones are chalk, hence the name of the garden, and were sourced from the south of England. Plants have been positioned so that different views are gradually revealed as visitors pass through it.
As you're moving through, you can look behind, you can look north, south, east and west, and you can find different areas which will feel personal to you.
Japan's national flower is celebrated at this festival too. A display of 3,000 chrysanthemums of 6 different varieties provides a burst of colour. It echoes the Japanese tradition of holding Kiku Matsuri chrysanthemum festivals every autumn.
Well, we know the very essence of Japan's culture is there's lots of calm and reflective nature, and so we've tried to commission work which helps with that calm and reflection within the building. So we're allowing people to walk through on a one-way route. You can move around the building as you wish when you're in, but it just gives people the opportunity to not feel too crowded, too overwhelmed. They get a chance to see things, reflect, and take things at their own pace as they walk through.
Visitors will also be able to take a Japan-themed walk around the grounds of Kew. The festival runs until October 31st. Neil Woodrow, NTD News, Kew Gardens.
Still to come, the story of an 81-year-old man who wanted a challenge to keep active after his wife went into 24-hour care. He set about climbing Scotland's mountains, all 282 of them. Find out more after the break. French clergy are believed to have sexually abused more than 200,000 children over the past 70 years. This is a result of a major investigation released on Tuesday. NTD's Natalia Nutting has that story.
An investigation into sexual abuse in the French Catholic Church has found that over 200,000 children were victims of abuse by clergy since 1950. An independent commission presented their report on Tuesday in Paris. The commission heads that the Church not only did not take the necessary measures to prevent abuse, but also failed to report abuse and sometimes knowingly put children in touch with predators. One abuse victim called the report a breakthrough.
It's an earthquake, a hurricane, a tsunami. When you see these numbers, it's so damning that no one can stay in denial, whether the Catholic Church or society as a whole.
Sur le plan de l'Église catholique et après pour la société tout entière.
Savignac was sexually abused by a priest at the age of 13. The man was found guilty by a French court 2 years ago. Savignac says that the conviction is an exception, stressing how hard it is for young Catholics to accuse representatives of the Church. He says the Church now has no choice but to compensate the victims.
It's not simply a couple of €1,000. With a little payment, we sweep it away. No, it's about real compensation based on the suffering of each person.
Savignac is also head of a victims association, Parler et Revivre, and contributed to the probe. The revelations in France are the latest to hit the Roman Catholic Church, which has been rocked by sexual abuse scandals around the world over the past 20 years. After the report's presentation, the head of the French Conference of Bishops asked for forgiveness and promised to act. Natalia Nutting, NTD News.
A migrant from Syria provides a rare eyewitness account of migrants trapped at the border of Belarus and Poland. Many thousands tried to cross from Belarus into the EU in recent weeks. NTD's Joanne Robson brings us this report.
After enduring a decade of war in Syria, Boshra al-Muallim and her 2 sisters seized their chance to flee. They had heard of a new migration route into Europe through Belarus, but the journey proved terrifying and nearly deadly. They became trapped at the border of Belarus and Poland for 20 days as armed guards pushed them from either side. They endured cold nights, mosquitoes, hunger and thirst. Only after al-Muallim collapsed of dehydration did Polish guards finally take her to a hospital. She says the guards were excessively harsh.
The police came, okay, you are illegal here, come. They took us to the border, and then we started our 20 days of a football game. Go, 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 go. No shelter, no food, no water.
Al-Muallim is one of thousands of migrants who travelled to Belarus in recent weeks and were then pushed across the border by Belarusian guards. She said Belarusian officials tricked her.
We didn't expect this to happen to us. We told us it's very easy to go to Europe to find your life, to run off war. I couldn't imagine I would live another 4 between the borders, and we are the weapons.
This migrant route emerged only after the EU imposed sanctions on the regime of the authoritarian Belarusian president, Alexander Lukashenko. The European Union calls Belarusian actions a form of hybrid war. The 3 EU countries that border Belarus, Poland, Lithuania and Latvia, accuse Lukashenko of acting to destabilize their societies. Poland denied entry to thousands of migrants and refused to let them apply for asylum, violating international human rights conventions. With 6 migrants found dead along the border so far, refugee rights groups criticize Poland's response.
The fact that these are Lukashenko's political actions directed against Poland and directed against the European Union is obvious to us. But this does not justify the actions of the Polish state, the direct victims for which are the people who suffer and die, not Lukashenko, because Lukashenko is not interested in the fact that people are dying.
A spokesman for Poland's security services says Polish forces always provide help to migrants if their lives are endangered. But he says Poland must defend its border.
Poland is of the opinion that only by thoroughly securing our border with Belarus, we are able to stop this migration route, which is a route artificially created by Lukashenko with Putin's support. It was artificially created in order to take revenge on the entire European Union.
Al-Muallim says she and her relatives plan to travel to their brother in Belgium and seek asylum there. Joanne Robson, NTD News.
Taiwan's ambassador to Germany called on the EU and the UK to stand with Taiwan in resisting China's provocations on the self-ruled island.
Europeans refuse to use the term Cold War, but the Cold War is actually no longer there. It is a hot war. It is still a war without ammunition now, but each side is actually ready to fire, and I believe the Chinese bear the brunt of the blame.
His comments come as Taiwan's premier on Tuesday said the island needs to be on alert following what he called China's over-the-top military activities. On Monday, 56 Chinese aircraft flew into Taiwan's air defense zone. That's the highest number in a single day. The international community increasingly sees tensions between the neighbors with concern. The Chinese regime claims a self-governed island as its own, despite Taiwan having its own military, democratically elected government and constitution. Staying in Germany, around 50 Uyghurs and others demonstrated in Munich on Monday against German companies' sponsorship of the 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics.
Weil in einem Land, wo Menschenrechte mit Füßen getreten werden.
Country that stamps on human rights and commits genocide must not be allowed to host the Olympic Games. Big international companies such as Allianz or Siemens should not act as China's sponsors.
Anderes Siemens sollten sie dabei nicht Chinas als Sponsor dastehen.
He says the persecution of Uyghurs in China's Xinjiang region is getting worse. Demonstrators stood outside the headquarters of Allianz, a multinational financial services company. An Allianz spokesman was on site of the demonstration but refused to speak on camera. In other news, the wealth gap in France continued to widen during the pandemic. According to official figures, and the poverty rate increased. An economist says the European Central Bank's decision to inject funds into the financial system rather than real economy made issues worse. NTD's France correspondent David Walliams has more on this.
Despite the government's financial assistance during the CCP virus crisis, poverty has gained ground in France. 21% of French are in poverty as of September 2021, according to official figures. And according to a survey, 32% of French struggle to pay their rent or mortgage. That means new categories of the population are now affected by poverty. According to economist Philippe Murer, the lockdowns created a downfall spiral for the French economy.
The lockdown policy was a choice. Whatever the consequences, it has cost the French people 240 billion euros, and they will pay twice for the bad management of the COVID crisis. First, they have paid by ceasing their activities. Then they will have to pay back the public debt.
In other words, taxes will be increased through different measures in France, and social security benefits will drop for the poorest category of population. Another statistic of significance, the mortality rate between March and April increased by 27% from 2019 to 2020. People living in the poorest municipalities were more heavily impacted. Paradoxically, the wealthiest 1% in France have increased their standards of living in the past 3 years. And France isn't an isolated case. According to Forbes, the 10 wealthiest billionaires around the world have increased their revenue by a combined $540 billion since March 2020. As part of its pandemic response, the European Central Bank, or ECB, injected funds into the Eurozone economy. But according to Murer, this was an unfair measure that contributed to the wealth gap.
In 2020, in order to sustain the economy, the ECB bought 2 trillion euros in bonds with the public money it owns. This is totally immoral, because very little money has been injected into the real economy, but the ECB funded the finance sector with all this big money, as if it was raining money. So we can see it's totally immoral, because we're increasing the capital of the wealthiest people, but entrepreneurs and business owners are being given almost nothing.
According to projections by the World Bank, approximately 119 to 124 million people will be pushed into poverty due to the CCP virus pandemic. David Walliams, NTD News.
And finally, an 81-year-old man set himself an intense and unusual challenge. To honour his ailing wife, he set out to climb the highest peaks in the Scottish Highlands, all 282 of them. Here's NTD's Eddie Aiken with his story.
81-year-old Nick Gardner gazes down from a wind-swept summit to the peaks, lochs and valleys below. Nick and his wife Janet moved from suburban England to the remote Scottish Highlands 30 years ago. In 2018, Janet was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. 2 years later, she was so ill She needed 24-hour care.
My wife got Alzheimer's 4 years ago, and when I couldn't look after her 2 years later, I had to get a challenge to refocus my life, and it had to be a challenge that would last some time.
Gardner was devastated and decided he needed to do something to help him cope.
When it got too much for me to handle, then she went into hospital and then care, and it just knocked me for six completely. I just didn't know what to do.
Mountain climbing enabled Gardner to focus and avoid the mental health problems he felt would plague him if he had nothing to do.
When Mallory was asked why does he climb Everest, he said because it's there. And this is something that I think all mountaineers feel. There's something special about mountains. Exactly what it is, I don't know. It's some undefinable thing about it.
The couple lived a quiet life, used to each other's company for 30 years. Then suddenly everything was gone.
She's extremely quiet. We never argued, and that's the truth. We never had a crossed word at all. Obviously some differences of opinion occasionally, but not very often. And we both liked a very quiet life.
The task Gardner set himself would challenge many half his age, to climb all of Scotland's Munros, or mountains above 3,000 feet, in 1,200 days. That's 282 mountains. He's climbed 177 so far. Other climbers expressed amazement when they hear about his challenge.
Obviously, I thought, I've got something here. I really have, and I didn't realise the potential. And so ever since then, when I see people on the hill, I stop them and have a little conversation with them, tell them what I'm doing.
Picking up social media skills with the help of his family, Gardner records his progress on Facebook and Instagram. He raises money for two charities that helped his wife, Royal Osteoporosis Society and Alzheimer's Scotland. He has already raised over £30,000. Eddie Aitken, NTD News.
That's the news for today, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Stuart Lees. Thank you for watching our daily news show on YouTube. You can also watch our other programming on channel 190 on Sky TV or on Freeview via channel box on channel 271. In the meantime though, please give this video a like and hit subscribe to our channel. Have a good day.